Hello, everyone, and welcome to the I Hope You're Weird podcast, where I read true and creepy stories from all around the world. If you are liking the podcast, please do hit the like button, as it would help my small channel to grow and show up in the algorithm of YouTube. Thank you. When I was 19, I worked for a company that allocated labor to rural areas of Australia. Basically, what you did was tell them when you were available, and they'd send you to a remote farm for a few weeks, where you would do whatever they needed done. It was hard work and long hours, but good pay and good fun, if you got in with a nice group of workers. When this occurred, I was working on a large property. I was told it covered roughly the same landmass as the state of Maryland, USA, about 9 hours from Sydney City, and the property itself was about 40 minutes from the nearest town. In short, it was the middle of nowhere. I was working at the farm, clearing bushland, with 3 other guys my age from the city. Our boss was a guy called Jeremy, who owned the farm and supervised us while helping out with the work. He was pretty laid back and was generally really good to us. This summer in particular was very hot and the work was hard. So one day when the temperature hit about 38 degrees Celsius, about 100 Fahrenheit, Jeremy decided to give us the afternoon off. He said he knew of a water hole on the farm, about a 25-minute drive north. I was keen for a swim, but the other guys just wanted to relax for the afternoon. So him and I hopped in one of the work trucks and started heading across the property. It was mostly wide, empty expanses with a few clumps of scattered bushland. Jeremy wasn't much of a talker, so we drove more or less in silence. After about 20 minutes, however, he suddenly perked up and jabbed me in the ribs.
You see that over there, beneath the 2 dead trees?
I should mention here that if you're not familiar with inland areas, particularly those in Australia, they are brown or red and mostly flat and bland, meaning any bright colors stick out like a sore thumb. So you can imagine our surprise when we could see a large, blue, angular structure far off in the distance. We steered in its direction, and as we got closer, we realized it was a huge blue shipping container, just sitting in the middle of nowhere. Jeremy was perplexed. I asked him if he knew what it was, but he obviously didn't. He said he hadn't seen it when he drove through the same area about 5 weeks before, and he wanted to go and see what it was. Initially, we pulled to a stop about 100 meters away from it. At this stage, I had a really bad feeling. The whole thing wasn't right. It's hard to explain, but if you can imagine seeing such a foreign object in the middle of a huge barren expanse, it had to be something weird. Jeremy, however, wanted to investigate, which I understood, given it was his property, but in truth, I was really anxious. As we got closer, things got even more bizarre. There was a big diesel generator behind it, thumping away, and a CCTV camera on each side, all motion activated, so they buzzed from side to side, following us as we moved around. I tried to reason with Jeremy, something along the lines of,
With all this security, someone obviously doesn't want us here. Let's just go.
He brushed me off, however, reminding me it was his farm and whoever had put this here was trespassing, so he wanted to go inside. Despite all the surveillance, there was only a small padlock on the huge door. We had some bolt cutters in his toolbox, and after a bit of a struggle, we broke the lock and went inside. The first thing I noticed was the rush of cold air as we got in. The place was air-conditioned, which I must admit was quite pleasant on such a hot day. We searched around for the light switch, but I could already see this was some sort of IT setup. There were flashing LEDs all around the place, and the sort of hum you hear when a hard drive is working hard. When we finally switched on the lights, we could see a sophisticated, albeit somewhat cluttered, office setup. There were hard drives the size of bar fridges and other computer equipment lining the walls, sometimes piled 2 or 3 high, and plastic storage boxes scattered around the far wall, and several desks with computer monitors arranged in the middle, complete with rolling office chairs. At this stage, I felt like I was in one of those nonsensical dreams. This made absolutely no sense. We wandered to the middle and sat down at the desks to see if the computers could give us any idea of what the hell was going on here. My heart was racing and I just wanted to bolt. We had been seen by the CCTV. So if anyone was monitoring, they already knew we were here. Jeremy, on the other hand, was adamant we had to get to the bottom of this. So I put on a brave face and started looking through the computer. This went on for a while, but in short, neither of us had a very high grasp of technology outside of Facebook and Microsoft Word. The best I can describe it from my lay position is that it was endless lists of computer talk. It was like the old Napster or LimeWire download screens looked like, just constantly picking up and receiving data, then recording it on several windows. I gave up on the computers and walked cautiously over the far end of the container to the big pile of storage boxes. By then I was pretty sure no one else was there, as there was nowhere to hide really, but I was still incredibly on edge. I decided, against my better judgment, to see what was inside all these boxes. My brief sift through the box still makes me feel sick to the stomach. It didn't take long for me to realize that this box was full of posters, DVDs and photos, all of hardcore child. One thing that still gets to me is that it was all neatly ordered into folders and smaller boxes. These people were organized. I immediately recoiled, jumped up and ran over to Jeremy. I could hardly string a sentence together. I said something to the effect of,
Mate, get out. It's child sex. Go. Get the up.
I dragged him out, composed myself, and managed to explain what I saw. We jumped back into the truck and sped back to the house. The farm had no mobile phone reception, and we hadn't bought the satellite phone, so we had to get back to the landline to call the police. Once we called them, they still had to make it all the way to the farm from the nearest police station, which was in a town about half-hour from the town closest to the farm. As I mentioned, very remote. We waited, talking frantically about what we'd seen, until the cops arrived. Almost an hour later, they arrived with 2 four-wheel drives, and we jumped in and let them back. This is where it gets worse. By the time we got back, the container door was open and there was fire inside. We had only 2 small extinguishers in the car, and these did very little. The fire department took an hour to get there, by which stage most of the damage was already done. An arson report by the federal police found almost no evidence of the computer equipment described, and only traces of paper and cardboard. This means that whoever ran it knew we were there and had time to come and remove most of it and get away. There were various ways to get off the property, and the landmass was huge, so there was no real way to tail them. Since the police hadn't taken us all too seriously in the first instance, probably due to our poor explanation on the phone, aerial surveillance was also impossible by the time we had pieced it all together. I took a keen interest in following it up, but with no real evidence of who might be responsible. The investigation went cold. I've kept in contact with Jeremy, and the shipping container is still sitting there on the farm, as it is too expensive to move. I'll never forget what I saw in those boxes. This story was a very long time ago, and a lot of it I struggled to remember, so I had to get a lot of details from my mum beforehand. Okay, so I'm a guy, and about 11 years ago, when I was 8 years old, me and my family, mum, dad, brother, as well as my brother's girlfriend, who was living with us at the time, went on holiday to Australia to visit some relatives on my mum's side of the family. They lived in the rural parts of Victoria, and to give a basic summary of the area, they lived on a farm. The house was surrounded by various fields. When facing the house on the left side, there were 2 fields, and then at the far end of these fields was a highly wooded area with a dirt track running through it. My grandparents, the relatives that lived there, would often go on nature rambles through the forest to spot the wildlife that lived within there. My mother, being a dedicated bird spotter, decides to head off with me and Lisa, my brother's girlfriend, into the forest, as we both had a fascination with wildlife. We must have been walking along the dirt track for around 10 minutes, taking various pictures of the various animals we'd seen. We passed by a line of motorbikes and around 7 bikers having a barbecue. One of the bikers politely smiled at my mother, and she responded with a simple
Good evening.
As we walked past them, one of the bikers approached us and asked where we were going. We told them, and they informed us that they had been camping in this area for around 2 nights. They told us to be careful, as people had been shooting game in the forest. These people apparently had aggressive dogs, so we were told to be careful. Around 15 minutes later, I'd spotted an old barn, which I dashed off to explore, being the adventurous child I was, while my mother and Lisa observed a bird of some kind. I didn't tell them where I was going. As I approached the barn, I saw 3 large dogs tied up outside. They were Rottweilers and they seemed incredibly aggressive. They were on chains and barking and snarling a lot. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed they were for hunting. But looking back, Rottweilers aren't hunting dogs. There was also an old mattress on the floor outside, which appeared to be covered in brown stains and emanated a foul aroma. I was around 3 feet away from the mattress, but the smell was unbelievably powerful. As I was going to turn around to return to the others, I saw a man emerging from the barn. The image of this man is one of the few things I remember clearly from this day. He was very tall, about 6'4", and was wearing a blue pinstriped suit. The strangest thing about him was that he was wearing a large top hat. His clothes seemed very worn, and his face, the parts of it that weren't covered by a large brown beard, were red, as if he had just been working out on a hot day. I remember the man smiled and approached me. I asked him if he was a magician, to which he said,
No, I look after doggies. Do you like doggies?
I told him I did. This is when things started to get weird. He began to approach me and asked if I wanted to come inside and have my picture taken with the dogs. I politely refused and said my mum would be looking for me. He grabbed my hand lightly and said it would only take a second. At that point, I heard my mum shouting to the man, demanding to know what he was doing. She had come looking for me. The man simply let go and just stared at her. She asked him again, in which he continued to just blankly stare. He didn't say a word. My mum immediately grabbed my arm and me, her and Lisa walked as quickly as possible back to the entrance. We got about halfway there when I turned around and told my mother that the magician was following us. She turned around and sure enough, he was power walking behind us. My mum screamed at him and asked what he was doing. He didn't reply again, simply continued power walking toward us. At that point, my mum began walking even faster, to the point that she was dragging me along. The next part of the story is mostly a blur to me. I remember my mum gasping, picking me up and sprinting full pelt with me while screaming for help. My mum tells me that the man had begun running towards us and managed to grab my leg. She said that Lisa jumped on the man's back and scratched all across his face before he threw her on the floor. My mum apparently kicked the man in the testicles, grabbed Lisa off the ground and ran with me over her shoulder. I remember we slowed down shortly afterwards and stopped to catch our breath. We continued walking over for the magician to show up again from the bush area. My mum began to panic and started running with me again. The man was sprinting after us. We were nearing the area where the bikers were camping and my mum screamed for help. 2 bikers emerged from the trees nearby and my mum screamed.
That man just tried to kidnap my son.
The magician turned around and immediately bolted in the other direction. One of the bikers pursued him, but unfortunately the magician had a head start. I remember the bikers were incredibly nice, and I soon forgot about the strange man after one of the bikers let me sit up front on his motorbike, while my mum and Lisa went in the sidecar. The guy took us into the nearest town and dropped us off at the police station, where my mum filed a report. After that, he gave us all a lift back home, which was really nice. I never got to thank him at the time, as I didn't really understand the situation, but on the off chance that you're a reader of Let's Not Meet, I want to say thanks. As for you, magician, whose intentions for me I am unsure of, let's not meet ever again. Added, to people who are wondering whereabouts in Australia this was, it was in the south of Victoria, just offshoot from a small town called 𝙈𝙚𝙩𝙨. So, I spent most of my summers in Australia helping out on my uncle's farm. In the family, it's just him, my female cousin who's never home because of ballet school, and my male cousin. My brother and I were there last summer when I was 14. I got up in the morning and walked into the kitchen, seeing a dude underneath the computer desk.
He's just fixing the computer. He'll be done in an hour.
My uncle had told me. My brother and my cousin went surfing while my uncle went to pick up something from the store. I get weird vibes from this bloke I've just been left alone with. He looks kinda like the guy from Smash Mouth, but with a patchier beard and thinner hair. He keeps tinkering away at the computer and I slink down the hall. Because I want my privacy, I open my female cousin's bedroom door and walk in, put her music on softly and leave silently after I slam the door. I then crept down the hall a little more into my male cousin's room and then roll under his bed. An amazing feat, but then again I'm a twig. And just start messaging back and forth with my boyfriend back home. I let the boyfriend know what was happening. I laugh it off because I'm inherently suspicious of any man or woman I don't know. We're making jokes about him flying down here and beating the repairman up, but then I hear footsteps down the hall. It's like the bathroom is right next to the computer, and the only thing down here is the bedrooms. What did he want? I hear my female cousin's door open, and he goes inside. Since she has lemonade, I can hear him walking around. Her bathroom door creaks, and I hear him pull it open, then leave the room. He was definitely looking for something or someone. My cousin's door creaks open, and he steps inside the room I'm currently hiding in. Thankfully, my cousin has a lot of under his bed, so I wasn't found. This dude is muttering to himself as he opens the bathroom, the closet, then leaves again, walking around the house. I'm freaked out at this point, but it gets way worse. A car pulls up outside, and it doesn't have the familiar sound of my uncle's truck. A phone rings and this dude picks up. There's a pause, and I furiously message my boyfriend, thoroughly and utterly spooked unawares.
Fine. They're going to be back any minute. Move fast.
I can't believe this is happening. People enter the freaking house. I couldn't tell how many footsteps, but I later learned it was 2 sets. I, stupidly roll out from under the bed so I can grab the phone on my cousin's nightstand. I couldn't use mine because it's a Canadian phone and roaming charges, you know. I'm about to dial 911 and then I get the moment of, I'm in a different country. What's the number for the men or women with the blue shirts and BT sticks and guns? So basically, I'm holding this pizza-shaped phone going when 3 dudes walk into the room.
More repairman?
I ask them, trying very hard to play dumb. Right now my boyfriend is messaging me like mad because I sent him about to call 911, might die. If I do, delete my internet history, and haven't messaged back since. I'm holding a phone and look very pale and shaky, which isn't good because they know I know what they're up to. They just file into the room and I have never been more glad to hear.
What the f*** are you doing?
So my brother walks in, soaking wet, holding a surfboard, looking very menacing, and these dudes are cornered as hell. They start making excuses, and by the time their sorry asses are done trying to explain why they've trapped a very scared looking teenage girl in a bedroom, my overprotective uncle shows up, holding a bag of milk and some frozen curly fries. He flips much beating ensues. Long story short, I almost got terrorized by 3 older men, and they ended up looking like a child with purple and red crayons, got bored and drew all over them.